Yes, a very good morning, and thanks so very much for joining us on this edition of The Big Issue. My name is Henry Sekanja. And today we're going to be talking about the budget. Now, Parliament last Friday passed shillings 48.1 trillion shillings budget, and out of these 15.6 trillion is going towards a recurrent expenditure. 14.49 trillion towards the development expenditure, 17.8 trillion is total expenditure, and 8.74 trillion towards human development capital, human capital development. That includes health, education, and of course gender. It also passed rather about 8 trillion will be going towards a domestic refinancing, and about shillings 6 trillion for interest repayment, and about shillings 2.4 trillion towards the domestic arrears. To discuss this, I've been joined by Mr. Julius Mukunda, who is the Executive Director, Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. That's CSBAG. Good morning, Julius, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, how are you?
Fine, fine. How's CSBAG?
No, it's our busy period, so we are trying to ensure that we end the budget process well.
You guys are doing a good job.
Thank you.
It's exercising us about the budget and everything.
Yeah.
We commend you for that.
Thank you so much.
Now, Julius, let's talk about the shillings 48.1 trillion budget that was passed by Parliament recently, last week. What do you make of this budget?
First is, I mean, we have a bigger budget than last year, so maybe we are rich. If you are a household and on an annual basis, your budget keeps on increasing, that means definitely you have opportunities where you are collecting more money. So we are looking at 48 trillion, and last year it was 44 trillion. So there is that upward trend. But then you say, where will this money come from? I think that's very important. URA is supposed to bring in 23 trillion. So almost half. So people are going to ask now, if you are going to bring 23 trillion, where would it have come from? I think that's our problem now, is that you are financing almost half of your budget. So the other half, of course, is borrowing. You have to borrow money. So if you are borrowing money and then you add on your own revenues, then you can be able to deliver services, which shouldn't be bad. But of course, it is at what cost are you borrowing on? Because that's what's very important. And now that takes us to the third point. But you find out out of the 44 we are talking about, only 30 is discretional. Discretional means that is the what that Parliament can decide on where to allocate it. That means the other one is already appropriated. It's committed. You can't touch it. You are supposed to pay the 6 trillion interest payments you're talking about. You have debt refinancing. You have arrears to pay, domestic arrears what we have been talking about. You have to pay back some loan amortization. So it means that even when we are thinking that we are expanding the resource envelope, is that our fiscal space is limited in terms of deciding where we can spend money. So that money is already there. And we continuously see this discussion of the spending actually, reducing. So it means we are beginning to ask ourselves, if we are borrowing, are we borrowing at the right prices? That's the question that we should be able to put into our mind. And I think one of the things that Ugandans need to know is that because of this continuous borrowing, our debt now stands at 73 trillion Ugandan shillings.
That's true.
Now, my argument personally has been, borrowing is not a very bad idea, but it depends on what you are borrowing for and how you are using the money. So we are finding that concessional loans are now decreasing. For example, in 2017, there were out of our portfolio, 74% was concessional loans, but now we are standing at 58. When we say concessional loans, what do we mean? We mean these are loans that are cheap to borrow, 1%, 40 years payment period. But unconcessional ones are when we go to Standard Chartered Bank as a government, and we go to Stanbic Bank as a government and pick money at a commercial rate, usually 10% and above, and the period is very short. This is when we go to Exim Bank of China and say, please give us money. The loan payment is very short. So that, I think, is the challenge that we are facing as a country. Of course, the major part also Uganda needs to understand is local government financing. Is that we need to send the money to local governments to perform. And I think local governments have, right now, they have a budget of 5 trillion, which has stagnated. It's from 4.85 trillion. You have all these many local governments that are coming up, but only 5 trillion is being given out. But even out of this 5 trillion, you find that almost entirely half of that budget is going for wages and non-wages. So basically, is that not much is going to take place in local government apart from paying the salaries of the workers, which I think, again, is something we need to look out for and say, okay, do we need all these districts? Because the administrative cost is extremely high.
That's true.
What should we do? I think one of the things that needs to be done is to put a freeze on the creation of these administrative units, and then we stop on that. So with the 48 trillion, we have it. We know URA is going to collect 23 trillion, but also we know that because of COVID, URA hasn't been performing well. Because we are also increasing the target. By the way, I think it's about the target, because when you look at, by end of December 2021, they had a shortfall of 860 billion. But if you look at the collections they make, by the way, the collections have been increasing over a time period. But whenever their collections increase, government also increases the target. So it becomes a bit of a catch and mouse game. So what should Ugandans expect from this budget? I think for me now, the things that could really come directly to them, I think for me there is one important element, which is the parish development model that we have been talking about. That this is the time where citizens are going to sit and decide on what kind of needs they need to spend their money on.
Okay.
Very critical. Part of local economic development. Because if you send money to my village, I can tell you that the priorities of the state will completely be different from the priorities of the central government. I will give you an example, is that there are villages where they will say, when this money comes, 100 million, for us, we are not going to buy seeds. We are not going to look for extension staff. Well, people, no, we already know all that. But our problem is marketing. We will hire a truck or buy it and start sending our goods to Kampala where they fetch higher prices. And that's what they will do, which I don't think the central government would have thought about that. So it's very critical and very important that the parish development model works. Because if it doesn't, it becomes a disaster.
It will be a very big problem for us. Let's talk about, initially government had budgeted for about 47 trillion. But towards the passing of this particular budget, money increased to 48 trillion from 47. What are the implications to the taxpayer? Should we be worried, or should we be happy because the budget increased from 47 to 48 trillion?
A taxpayer should always get worried when the expenditure of government increases. Because we provide the money to government. So if today you've been paying two ways. One is that you've been paying the money to sustain the government, but now their bills have increased. They have invoiced you more. So definitely you are likely to be taxed more. But secondly is that even when they have not increased the prices, they are likely to go ahead and borrow money. So when they borrow money, because this actually is majorly is going to be borrowed money, when they borrow more money, at the end of the day, you come back and this money is going to be picked from your URA collections. So the interest rate increase, the interest pay will increase, but also in terms of the amount of money that would have gone to other areas is going to go to first pay the debt and the interest. That's why I was telling you that even when we are happy that we have 48 trillion, we have around 30 trillion only for as a discretionary budget we can decide on. So why can't we have the right to decide on the whole 48? No, because already that 48 portion of it is already statutory. You can't touch it because it has been for debt servicing and the rest of the people. But there are certain good elements. I think that certain things we can do where we might not be very affected so much. One of them, of course, is to improve our tax administration. And I have been an advocate of, we should pay taxes, all of us, but we should pay our fair share. If we are running the same business, let us pay the same tax. You could be smart and you know how to balance your books properly and you avoid tax and declare less. Me, I try to declare whatever I make. So there I think it's time for URA to ensure that everybody pays their fair share of tax. I've given an example. Look at rentals, for example. Rentals is majorly concentrated in Kampala. But we buy the same cement from Hima and Tororo. If whatever I'm going to build is either in Kampala or in Rukunjiri or in Koboko, we are all getting rental income, whether less or more, but it's rental income. So how come that we are only stuck in Kampala and we have not covered the whole country? Look at supermarkets. Major supermarkets, the big ones, are the ones where you find that URA has concentrated more because they have systems to put the if receipt, for example. But if you go to these urban centers across the country, you have huge supermarkets. For them, a receipt, they can even give you a receipt or not. But we should also ensure that everybody gets into the bracket and pays the same amount of money. If we don't, then you will see some major supermarkets falling off. And we have seen them. Nakumatt went. We know Uchumi, I think, also left. Why? Because
quite a number of them have left the market.
Yes, have left the market simply because we are in the same market and others are paying taxes, others are not paying taxes. So that affects us in so many ways.
Yeah. And as civil society, what is your position on this particular budget that will be read by the President very soon?
The beauty with this budget is that we started participating from the beginning last year in September across the country in the regional budget consultative meetings. We put in our views. A number of our views have actually been taken. You know, and I think for me is that we now have a better picture of how the budget is going to look like. Not even a better picture. I think we have the picture of how the budget is going to look like, except for a few surprises that the minister might want to bring out. But I think among them is that we have the parish development model that is working, which is very splendid and good. We want it to be ensured that it is ready. Everybody is ready to implement that. We want to see our health center 3s also upgraded. We want to see medicines delivered to the people. We want to ensure that you know, money for scholastic materials, money for teachers is put there. Water and sanitation in schools, but also in villages. So you'll find a number of things are there. Of course, there are also other things that we thought government should have done, so that we can have better efficiency in the management of resources. And of course, we still have a problem with public investment management, the management of our projects. It's a very big concern, because because we are right now is that only 40% of the projects in Uganda are on time. The rest are not. And the classical example, of course, is if you go to our express highway here, it took 20 years to be finished instead of 5 years. So, and also the cost also multiplied more, almost doubled. So you want a project to start and it is finished so that people can begin to benefit from it. When it is not, we spend more on it and then we don't benefit from that particular project in a time. The other big element we are fighting for in government is government projects are extremely very expensive. To procure a pen like this in the government, it can take you 6 months. But also the price of buying this pen is
extremely high.
Extremely high. But the other concern also is that the same pen from the same supplier, supplying the same government to different departments, has different prices. You know, in this ministry, the pen will cost 1,000. In another ministry, it is 3,000. Another ministry, it is 500. In a district, is so you ask yourself, why don't we have a price list for government? And the government says for us, a pen we shall buy it at 500, so everybody follows that. So those different elements make us be inefficient, make us lose money, and at the same time, that means that then you find that the benefits that we would have got from the budget are actually reduced because of those inefficiencies and those leakages.
Beautiful. Yeah, let's talk about the allocations and then government priorities. For example, in this particular budget, we are seeing defense is getting about 1.2 trillion shillings, health 1.4 trillion, the Ministry of Energy 1.4 trillion, Lands Ministry 503 billion, UNRA 2.5 trillion shillings. What do you think about the allocations? Are we setting up priorities right? Are we giving the money to the right sectors where it should go to benefit the locals, the citizens of this country?
And I think that's our biggest challenge right now, is we are seeing a shift. Because let's say, for example, we know that Ugandans spend almost 42% of their income on food. What would you do to ensure that food is available to Ugandans and at a lesser cost? Quality food, safe and quality food. You'd find that more people have shifted from other sectors of the economy to subsistence agriculture. Right now, they were 41%. People who were involved in subsistence, now we're at 52%. So you would want really to concentrate on agriculture more than anything else. Let me tell you, we are talking about price increases. There is an agitation. But if this increase was around food shortage, there would be riots in Kampala. So it means that we have a chance to spend more money on agriculture and deal with most of the problems that we are facing. So for me, first, I'm happy that human capital development takes the first priority of the budget. That is education and health. And we have been engaging on that, and I'm very happy that it's being done. That we must invest in our people, education and health. My only challenge is agriculture. Because with agriculture, we are still doing the same things. We've not learned from what COVID, how we overcame COVID. We overcame COVID not on anything else. Let me tell you, it's because we had our food. People still would go and grow food and it comes out. I would have really loved to see us, even in this crisis, to see us that we can produce our own wheat. So we don't need
don't have to import.
That we can produce our own palm oil. If we can't produce palm oil, there are so many oil seeds around. You know, genus, castor oil, simu. We would have done that. And remember, we have a vegetable oil development project in this country. What has it been doing for all these years? So you find we are in a place where we should have learned something out of COVID to give us a wake-up call. The things that we are missing in this country, except for petrol, could have been produced. We shouldn't be caring about palm oil. If, as a nation, we strategically said, let us produce oil seeds, because we import almost 80% of oil in this country, despite having Karangara. So it tells us there's a huge potential for farmers here to grow seed oils and be able to take it to the market. Once you have seed oils, then the question of soap also is solved immediately. So those deliberate steps are not there. And I think, I don't know what happens when people are beginning to sit and budget, but I think we need to shift from the norm of that every year we just budget for agriculture, but we must budget specifically for certain items that can help us replace what we are importing. For heaven's sake, how can we import potatoes?
It's very embarrassing.
It's how do you import vegetables? But the people who are importing and the businesses that are here, they are telling us, look, your potatoes in Mondi, they have so many eyes, you know, those small roots on a potato. And when you're making chips, you lose a lot because you're trying to
cut them out.
But I know we have a National Agriculture Research Organization. Their major role is to give us good hybrids. So what have they been doing? But also it's a question of, you just don't tell farmers to produce. They must produce for a particular market. And as such, if the Japanese want squared melons, we can't send our 5-kilogram watermelon to a Japanese. They will say, no, we don't have where to even to keep it. So you need to tell farmers to produce for a particular market. And I think that's my next point of how are we investing in the markets. because we need to sell out to anybody so they can consume our products. That's why you see coffee is getting better deals, because they have really worked on quality. They find you sun-drying your coffee on the ground, you get arrested because you are killing the quality of coffee. So the same thing should go to all these products that we are making. So
I get farmers really organized.
I really want to see money specifically in agriculture, but specifically for particular areas of our interest, to be able to cushion ourselves from these particular shocks that we are talking about.
Let's talk about wasteful expenditure, something that you have talked about as civil society, that government is spending a lot of money on things that are not very important. Has wasteful expenditure been addressed in this particular budget for next financial year?
Yes and no. Yes, we've decided the new PSST actually has been spearheading on these wasteful expenditures, and I think he was able to realize around $1 trillion plus Ugandan shillings, which we have invested in the PDM, and that's good. But I think there is still more. You see, in times like this, it's just not only about wasteful expenditure, but it's about those expenses we should forego now to be able to deal with what is happening. For example, this is not the time to buy new fleets of vehicles.
That's true.
Really? No. Because new fleet of vehicles with fuel that has doubled means that we are going to pay more money to service these particular elements. Yesterday we were in a meeting and somebody's like, if you're a state minister with 3 vehicles and a siren surely in this country, what is it for? Those are expenses. We have to feed those people, pay their fuel, close them, and everything. That should must go. This is the time we should be able to ensure that we have rationalized all agencies. Rationalization is taking so slow. It has become political. Nobody wants his agency to be merged with another one, because each and every agency is independently. And yet we have $1 trillion there that we can save and put in productive resources. Really, at this particular moment, all these creation of district would have put a stop on it and say, please stop. But we are still creating more. So for me, these are expenses that we could put on hold for now until we return back to normality. Because all this budget is based on the recovery, that we are recovering, but we have not recovered properly to pre-pandemic levels. We have not. So we need to cautiously ensure that businesses grow. But if we are not going to invest them properly, for example, domestic areas, you are not paying these businesses back their money. You get money from people supply you and they pay them after 3-4 years. That business would have collapsed if they had got a loan from a bank. So for me, those wasteful expenditures are some of the areas that we need. Those are some of the areas that we need to get out from the budget completely. In fact, it is my proposal that we go back to zero budgeting. That we say the budget is put a stop on this budgeting process and we just starting newly on a new sheet. I think that's when we can be able to get out. So special meals, workshops,
travels abroad,
entertainment, and those I think should not appear in our budget. But above all, we must have the cost of delivering services to citizens in this country. It must be streamlined.
You talked about the public debt that has now reached about 73
trillion.
Yes, and something that is worrying everyone, Ugandans, and of course our development partners. How can we, better manage our public debt so that it doesn't go through the roof?
Public debt goes with public investment management, because we usually borrow. We have not reached at a level like our neighbors who borrow to pay salaries, and that's very bad. When you reach there, you borrow money to pay salaries. We are likely to go to 52 to 53% of GDP, so we should have gone beyond the 50% threshold that the government has, that we have been trying to put ourselves on. And of course, we blame everything on COVID. We had to borrow money for COVID and do that. I think for me is that the biggest challenge we face, the things we need to do, are majorly 2. Number 1, for me on the debt, is we must look for concessional loans. That's very, very important. Let us get out of domestic market. Because you can see that next financial year, domestically, we are going to borrow 4.9 trillion. And domestic loans are very expensive. So we need to strategize and ensure that we look out for concessional loans. Loans that are a very low interest rate, usually 1%. Loans that have got a grace period of like 5 years. Loans that have got a maturity of 40 years. Those are the loans the government should look out for and leave the domestic market for our private sector. That's why our interest rates are still very high, because when Stanbic or any other bank is looking at you and is looking at the government.
So we're competing with the government.
So you can't compete with government. You just cannot. And I'm looking forward for government to be able to say, please, we are decreasing domestic borrowing and we leave it for the private sector. The second thing on debt is to improve on our public investment. You see, it's like this. We borrow money for a road to be completed in 5 years. And when we sign the contract, the road, the contractor is not ready to start the road. But when in the middle of constructing the road, a tree appears in the middle of the road. And the tree is a spirit, it claims it wants 500 million for a tree to be shifted to somewhere else. And then you begin arguing about the tree, it takes you another year. You are delaying the project. So we need to be ready to only borrow for projects that are ready to start running. If you want to build a road, make sure that people are resettled, they are out of, you have the right of way. If you're going to start a road project, ensure that you have a physical plan, that this is how the road will look like. But you don't borrow money to develop a physical plan and resettle people. No, it can't happen. So we need to have ready-made projects to run. If we do that, I can tell you, I would not be worried even if we come at 100%. Why? If you look at USA, if you look at Japan, you look at these major huge countries, their debt to GDP is in the roof. But they are not worried because the execution rate is extremely very high, so the returns come back. If entire airport was finished in time, we would be able to pay back the Exim Bank money. But we can't, simply because we are still stuck in trying to complete it. So for me is, let us only borrow from concessional loans that are low, but only borrow for projects that are ready-made. You can't say we shouldn't borrow. No, we need more resources.
Because one borrows at the end of the day.
Yes.
I want to take you back to the issue of parish development model. Government is considering this as a priority area, but when you look at the money that has been invested in this program, one would think it's very little.
Extremely. Very, very little and inadequate. You have two things here on the parish development model. First is that this is the best approach we are going to deal with economic development and reduce poverty. Why? Because people will be determining their own priorities, not for central government. That's the number one and very critical. But the most important part is readiness for parish development model to take off. If they are not ready, we're going to lose money. Because you must make sure that the parish chief is in a place. Not only in a place, but he is trained enough to manage this parish development model money. Otherwise, money will get lost. You must ensure that the parish development committee exists. That's number one. But number two, it is functional. They meet on a regular basis. They understand the guidelines on how to spend the money and how to collect the money. If that is not there, we're going to be back here and lamenting about how parish model has let us down. However, but the most important part also is, out of the 7 pillars, we are only seeing only one pillar being given money, and that's financial inclusion. But for me, my major fear is readiness. And for the last 2 quarters, I've seen Minister of Finance not releasing money because the parish development committees were not ready. So I'm like, I think it's still a very good approach. Let us give money to only those parishes that exist, that are functional, and ready to receive the money and start work. Those that are not, when they are, then they can come and request for money. But I'm looking forward to see where the parish development model really money has tripled. Because a 300 million in my parish I'm telling you, you start creating millionaires in your own area. And I think it's really a very good way. I'm hoping and wishing that politicians really don't interfere so much in the delivery of this model, because it's our game changer. And I believe that it is going to be a very good way of making an ordinary person share on the national budget directly. It's not about we are providing roads and security and no. You actually getting your share from the national budget directly, and it's getting into your pocket. And I think for me that's very important.
Very good. Julius, recently government introduced program-based budgeting, but we're seeing increased supplementary budget. Just recently, I think that was last week, Parliament passed another supplementary budget for about 600 billion to pay for salaries, wages, and all that kind of thing. Are we going off track?
I think this financial has been unprecedented, really, because there's the 3.5 trillion that we had passed last time, and now this one is also coming. The challenges with supplementary budget is that it distorts the budgeting process. My experience with supplementary budgeting is that it is actually intentional for accounting officers for two major reasons. One is that when an accounting officer realizes that he doesn't have enough money, he will only budget for things that are not core mandate of his agency. Let me give an example, a very critical one, and you understand this one and our audience. If, for example, UNEB, I don't think UNEB does that, says that does not budget for marking of exams and only budgets for travel abroad, training staff, and the rest. If it comes for a supplementary budget for marking exams, everybody would be in a panic mode in the Ministry of Finance or even at Parliament. And then it just passes. Simply because there was no person to say, before you budget for anything else, budget for a core mandate immediately, fast, so that we reduce the risk of you asking for supplementary budget. So that's one, the lack of scrutiny on financing core mandates. The second thing I've seen at supplementary budgeting is poor planning. You have an agency and you decide to recruit in the middle of the financial year. After recruiting, then you want a supplementary budget. But the supplementary budget definition in our PFM guidelines is very clear. That expense you want must be unavoidable. That if you don't spend it, the country is likely to collapse. That's why you always find security. Because whoever thought we are going to go to Congo and camp there? So it qualifies because it's unavoidable. But that expense must have been unforeseeable. It means that you never expected it. And again, I give the example of the security. We never expected that we would really deploy in Congo. And actually, we don't even know how long we're going to stay there. But also the third is unabsorbable, that the expense is too huge for you to absorb with your current expenses. So when you see somebody budgeting for salaries, arrears, just know that one is a poor planner, a poor accounting officer who doesn't know how to plan and budget for his ministry. And this is something we have been pushing to the Ministry of Finance, that let us only, because supplementary budgets are inevitable, but let us only budget for those activities that surely were not planned for. Because you can't be a ministry and say, I want a supplementary budget to organize an international conference. These international conferences are planned for 2 years. They will tell Uganda, you will be hosting the Olympic Games, for example. 2 years, so to start preparing. So you just come in the financial and say, we need money for this. So poor planning is a result of our supplementary budgeting. Last thing on supplementary budgeting, I think for me is, it's now has been abused also, the whole process. Because if you go to Parliament, you can easily be convinced. So that's why now you see there is a lot of budgeting in the Parliament than in the Ministry of Finance, because you need first to follow the process. But people first go to Parliament, then the Parliament puts pressure on the Ministry of Finance to spend the money. And I think that angle must also be stopped, and then we'll do better in terms of financing.
Yeah. Let's also talk about the issue of taxes. We're lucky that this particular financial government needs to introduce new taxes. And I want to ask, do you think government is taxing the right items and sectors?
Of course, the better part would have been to even reduce taxes. But we are in a catch-21 situation, which means that when you reduce, then you don't get the money to finance these projects. With taxation, I think for me this year around, and why you find we have not even tried to engage in this taxation bill so much is because the process has also been very consultative. We have actually met finance a number of times on the taxation bills to give our proposals. And the major proposal for me was, let us not introduce new taxes. And I think that was appreciated and taken on board. But the whole idea now is to improve efficiency and administration of taxes. For example, I want URA to be on each and every border of Uganda so that we're able to collect the small little money that is there. So funding for URA is very critical and very important. I used to criticize the Entebbe airport. You would reach there when Qatar Airways lands and Emirates and Ethiopian Airways. It's like, you know, more than 3,000 people at the airport, and you only have one scanner. So you want to scan each and every bag. But in the middle of scanning, the airport is full. So what do? You say, please start going out, so that you reduce on the crowd. But now, when you buy a second scanner, then the operation improves and smoothens. And I think it's true that these non-intrusive methods of checking goods and services at the border is the way to go. So that you don't, somebody brings a container, tell them, okay, open it, start counting. No. People are using, scan the whole container and they see what is inside. Whether actually what is inside is what actually is written on the books. That one eases the process. So when you go at Maraba, you go at Busia and you see 500 trucks parked and they are not really moving as quickly as possible. That goes into the cost of doing business in this country. So you want to smoothen the correction of taxes and its administration so that it is easier for me to pay taxes, so that I can be able to go the next day and sell my goods and services and then come back. But if I am to spend a day at the border trying to clear, they will just try to clear your goods one day and see. Try even a car that is here. You say you want your money, you want to clear the car. I'm telling you, you want to get it the same day, even it's the bond. And I would think that for me, these are elements we should be able to do. If you have the money, you pay the taxes, move on, so that you ease the business in this country. So on the tax administration, I think one is, yes, it's a welcome idea. We don't increase taxes. Okay. But number two is tax exemptions. As of today, we are losing 7.7 trillions every year on tax exemptions. And tax exemptions include people who are not paying VAT, people who are not paying excise duty, who import goods and services and they don't pay because they're exempted, our investors. It's exemptions, of course, everybody's exempting, so we can't say don't exempt. But I think we should have a cost-benefit analysis on exemptions. We're exempting you from doing this. What are we gaining out of this? That's number one. Number two is monitoring these exemptions. You promised to inject $100 million in this project. You promised to employ 1,000 Ugandans. You promised to do 1, 2, 3 things. Have you done them? That is what is missing right now. After we dish you with, we give you the exemptions, the story ends from there. Following exemptions, performance is extremely very difficult and has not been done. And we are losing money. So 7.7 trillion is quite a huge amount of money that we are not following. So in terms of tax administration, I would want to see a framework on monitoring these exemptions so that if you promise to provide $100 million and we meet you in Chikubu selling chapati, then we put you on the next plane back home.
Yes, sure.
That should be as simple as that. If you promise
100 jobs to Ugandans and you have not delivered on that,
100 jobs Ugandans and you are employing 100 jobs other people, then we just say thank you very much. We put you on the next plane, then you go back home. that's how discipline, business discipline will come into people. But also that gives us a leverage that we are a serious nation in terms of managing, of managing businesses. So that anybody who is going to ask for exemptions, then he knows, or she all knows, that they are going to be monitored. So I want to see more of that, of monitoring these exemptions. Of course, there has been the question of that exemptions are only for foreigners. They are not for local investors. And I think it is not true. The exception is that we don't have the thresholds required to get those exemptions. Because the law currently says $300,000 to begin to get the exemptions. How many Ugandans are going to raise $300,000?
Not very many.
Not very many. Remember, Bank of Uganda is telling you that a big percentage of us have accounts, have deposits of less than 1 million. So 1 million is around like $250. So that one itself, so will not help us. So exemptions are provided because you have so much money coming into the country. But then we need to be able to follow up those exemptions so that you're not a chapati seller when you came in as an investor.
Good. And as we wrap up, government has projected that the economy is going to grow up to 6% in the next financial year. Currently, I think we are at 3.8%. Do you think this is visible for us to grow, our economy to grow at 6% in the next financial year?
Why not? We can. You see, there's something I've realized about my country, Uganda. We are very resilient people. Very resilient. If you compare the effects of COVID with the rest of the other countries, we're the only country who never went into recession. We still grew, but at a less speed. And we are recovering very fast. I'm expecting actually even to go beyond the 6.3 that we're talking about. For a following reasons. One is that if we implement the parish model properly, because now you are really trying to let communities get on board. Get on board. And you should also jump on the parish development model, because people want to make money. Because I'm going to go to this circle that is getting money from it to improve on my business and get more money into my pocket. When people get money into their pocket, consumption levels, demand increases. You get somebody and give him 100,000 who has been very poor, and you see there is instant change in their life immediately. So I'm looking at that. Secondly is the business in Uganda. If you really don't constrain the people in terms of these lockdowns, there's so much that takes place. A lot of it, so much that takes place. Our night industry is the most vibrant one in the region. For example, if you see how Chikubo can be vibrant, you know, it's amazing. But also COVID has brought opportunities. If you see now how many people tried to start selling things online, that's a huge market that is already there. When there is scarcity, I was talking to my friends, when soap went to what, 10,000, you don't know how many small-scale industries are being organized to make soap by hand. So all those are opportunities. And let the government help us to open these borders properly, like Congo. And I think that has been my problem. We are in Congo providing them peace. We are in Congo providing them roads. But there is nobody organizing us to go to Congo and sell our matoke and sell our pineapples, and because that's what we sell, matoke, the pineapples, because we don't have cars to sell there and these other big things. Somebody should organize us. We take our things to the DRC. And I think, for me, if government can do those small things, let it leave the rest to us. The Ugandans are very entrepreneurial, are very business oriented, and they can deliver.
Yeah. Julius, before I let you go, let's talk about the high commodity prices. The president recently addressed the nation on Sunday, and he said we should be frugal. Do you think the government itself is being frugal?
So high prices. I mean, we can talk of the causes of those high prices. But somebody from Koboko if I was telling my mom and she said, but why are prices high? And I said, it is because of Russia and Ukraine. Can't you talk to them? And they stop fighting and we get our models. They don't care about all of those things. All they care is that prices should be stable. But this has happened. This is a shock. Government is telling us to be very frugal. And yesterday I was telling them, it is okay to be frugal and we eat cassava. But are we all eating cassava? Is cassava eating universal or it's only for specific individuals? And I think the cry in this country is not that the prices are high. The cry in this country is that some people are eating cassava, but others are still eating bread. So, and yet we are in the same situation. So I think it is important, first, that we see government being frugal itself. I would have loved to see our president say, because we are all going to be frugal, from now on, there is no business class ticket for any person who is using public money. I would clap my hands. He would say, I have banned travel for non-essential things. I have, I'm required that all these workshops that are there, reduced. The freights, these new vehicles we are buying, said, no, we are going to put a ban on buying of new vehicles, of travel, so that we are all, there we are now at the same level. We say, yes, my government is being frugal, they also may tighten the belts. But when I tighten the belt and somebody is losing theirs, then now we begin to fight about that. So that's number one. But number two is, I'm cautioning government, let us not have a cobra effect. A cobra effect, in essence, is that you are trying to solve a crisis by creating more crises. Let's talk about subsidies on energy, for example. This is a problem in energy. Only 20% of Ugandans actually are on electricity. So if you give a subsidy, you are only just targeting only 20% of Ugandans. The other ordinary person who is crying won't be able to benefit from the subsidy. Zero, they will not get it. So for me, I'm asking government to do two things. One, make sure there is no shortage, that the supply chain is working, that fuel can get into this country, that palm oil can get into this country. Let us make sure there is no shortage. And shortage also on food. Let people grow their food. The shock will be overcome. Number two, for me, is let us be frugal, like how you say, efficiency in delivering services. Because if Ugandans are spending 42% of their income on food, make sure that the food is available. If they're spending money on health and education, make sure the education services in this country are available and health and medicines are also available. When you do that, you are cushioning them in some way or the other. But if you say you want to reduce taxes, for example, it would have been a good idea. But Sri Lanka did the same. They reduced taxes. And they failed to pay salaries for their workers. So not only have they failed to pay salaries for their workers, but they also failed to pay money to fulfill their debt obligations. So it becomes a catch-21. So they are trying to solve a crisis, they are also creating more crises on the table.
Thank you very much, Julius. Julius Mukunda, Executive Director, CS, the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. Thank you very much for the insights.
Thank you so much.
For us the 48 trillion shillings national budget that will be presented by the Minister of Finance, I think early next month, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Next month.
Thank you very much, Julius, for joining us. It was great having you. My name is Henry Sekanjako. That was the big issue, and of course, rush hour continues. Good morning.